know where you were born, what your passions were as a kid?
Well, I mean, I was born in London, son of refugees from the Holocaust. I don't remember anything from London since I was a year and a half old when I came to New York.
That's interesting. And as a child, did you think that you'd go into the teaching field?
No, actually, there were many things that I was looking at in my career, for a career. And one of the things was actually I wanted to go into psychology, be a clinical psychologist. That was, I think, my real passion in high school. I was constantly reading Sigmund Freud, Karen Horney, Adler, Jung. I just kept on reading and reading all their material, and I just loved that. And I thought that I might want to go into clinical psychology.
I see.
Was that an influence of your parents on you?
I don't know what it was an influence. I mean, every Jewish kid, I think, has some kind of feeling that they need to be analyzed. I mean, every Jewish kid, I think, is somewhat neurotic. Well, we all are neurotic. And I think Jews, like all ethnic people, have their fair share of neurosis. And I think we try to figure ourselves out. And I had a real interest in psychology.
That's interesting. Now, what made you decide to become a teacher? Did you have a particular person in your life who made you feel like teaching was the way to go?
Yeah, I mean, my other passion was actually history and teaching history, and I think it really, I loved history. That was my other subject that I really, really loved, and I was fortunate enough to have some really fantastic high school teachers.
Yes.
And then I think that was the first great impression on me. I think 3 out of my 4 high school teachers were absolutely magnificent, and I fell in love with history. I loved history from grammar school on, from middle school, but in high school it really caught on. And of course when I went on to college, and I still was toying the idea of going into clinical psychology, the psychology department at Rutgers University was extremely experimental and not humanistic, and I kind of got very disillusioned in psychology, and I felt it really was not for me, and so I went into my next passion, and that was history.
Now, speaking of falling in love with the subject, could you tell us a little bit about how you met your wife?
Actually, I met my wife was actually a blind date.
Really?
Yeah, it was a blind date, and it was actually the way that it worked is that an old friend of mine through high school, a woman who was a friend of mine, this was her girlfriend in college, and she was going out with a friend of mine, and she said, "You want a double date, and I can have a blind date," and it was love at first sight.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you know she was the one? I know it's a question that a lot of high school kids want to know.
Like, want to rest over here just so I don't get to keep them.
I don't think high school kids are, I mean, it takes time to really mature to know, reach that aspect of life to be sensitive and mature enough to know which woman is the one for them. I'm not even sure if college kids. I was at my age because we got married very, very young. I got married right after I got my master's degree, and she got married right after she graduated from college. That was relatively young in those days. So I don't think high school kids know that. But then I can't really answer that question. You just sense it and feel it, and I definitely knew that was the one.
Did she feel the same way?
I would hope so. It's lasted a long time.
Oh, that's good though. Now, tell us a little bit about your college experience. Any parties, fraternities?
Actually, I was a pretty serious guy in college.
Hard to believe.
Yeah, hard to believe. But I was quite serious. I was very politically active, especially towards the last 2 years of my high school, college career. I became very politically active. This was the mid to late '60s. This was Vietnam, so I didn't have much time to really party. I was very active politically and was very involved in the anti-war movement. So that took up a lot of my time.
Now, would you say that your involvement in the anti-war movement led you to go to Woodstock to kind of promote the feeling of peace and unity?
Well, Woodstock is, that's something that, I teach all the students that Woodstock was something apolitical, and much of the counterculture was really not political, was very apolitical. And when you talk about the counterculture and you talk about the New Left movement, sometimes you talk about two very separate things, although they tend to blend together. But when you go to, the music that we listen to, some of it was not very political at all. It was, there was a social consciousness, of course, but a lot of it was just very hedonistic and had nothing to do with political life.
I see. Now, if you had the opportunity to go to Woodstock 2009, would you go?
Only if Radiohead would play there. If Radiohead would be there, I think I would go, because I've been listening to some of the music that is very popular today, especially of the indie bands, and some of the bands are quite good, but I don't seem to get it as much as I got it way back when the 60s, the classic sound was in. But certainly if groups like Radiohead would be playing, I'd be there.
Now, what's the biggest change you'd say in the field of music over the past 40 years? Obviously there's a change, but to you, what strikes you as the biggest difference between music in 2008 and music in 1969?
I would still have to say that there's more of a political consciousness, a kind of social message that is very much imparted by some of the music of the late 60s and early 70s. I don't think you find quite as much of it, although honestly, I can't say because I haven't really listened to that much music of your generation, so I don't want to judge that. But from the little I've heard, most of the groups they don't resonate with me. Let's face it, I'm 40 years older, so I can't really pass judgment. I don't want to pass judgment on that.
All right, makes sense. Now, before Jesse and I have to get back to class,
sure.
What would you say? What was it which made you become a follower of Hofstadter?
Excuse me?
Hofstadter, Richard Hofstadter.
Well, I think Hofstadter is a wonderful writer. And I think the one thing that drew me to Hofstadter, he's more of a writer, more of a historical commentator, more of a historical critic, a social critic, rather than a historian. Even though he is a historian, but his style and his focus is much more embracive of the humanities, being more of a humanist rather than being strictly a historian. And that's what really finally drew me. It's more of that sense rather than his concept of consensus. Even though I do think that for the most part consensus is very viable, and I was, of course, very much influenced in the history department at Rutgers University. Let's face it, during the 60s, I was very much influenced by the New Left. By the Marxist interpretation of history, and when I finally found Hofstadter, it was a refreshing, completely different way of looking at America, and I think it works better applying it to American history. If I'd be teaching European history, maybe I'd still be a Marxist historian, maybe I still would subscribe to the New Left, I don't know.
One last question,
sure.
Doc. When kids think about Dr. Cahn, the first thing that comes to mind is his sense of style. So where did you get your sense of style from? I think it's a question that every MTA kid wonders.
My sense of style. Well, I don't think you get a sense of style. I think you kind of are born with it. And I think it's, of course, there are many influences of style that I have, but I've always felt you try to look your best, you try to present yourself in the best way you know how. You go to work looking your best, and that's it. There's no intentional style that I try to create. Is just feeling, true to yourself and try to look your best.
When did you start wearing the suspenders?
I think I started wearing suspenders actually in this school. So I think maybe my style really started in MTA at Yeshiva University High School for Boys, and actually grew. So if you're talking about my sense of style, maybe I owe it to you guys. Maybe you guys, maybe you gave me some feedback, so maybe my style really evolved out of you.
So do you think the Rav, who has a lot of influence on the school, influenced your style in a way?
The Rav, well, he had his own unique style, but I would be pretty arrogant and conceited to in any way compare myself to the Rav in any way.
Right.
Doc, can we see the suspenders? What color are they today?
Sure, why not? There you go.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
It's good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay?
Great.
All right.
Thank you,
okay,
Doc.
thank
All
you.
right, take care.
Okay.